Hi, welcome everyone to today's senseFly Academy. My name is Andrea, I'm the training manager here at senseFly, and today I have with me Matt Delano, Field Operations Manager from the US team. Today is all about airspace regulations, flight safety, and Part 107, Becoming an Airman. We'll be mainly talking about these topics. So, what becoming an airman means, a certification example with Part 107 from the US, and they will talk about some useful knowledge that every airman should know about, like airspace, communication, regulations, and information. Becoming an airman. Let's look at these two videos a bit. This one, we can even watch them at the same time. Okay. How do you feel about these situations? Isn't that a bit, I mean, somehow it is cool. On the other hand, well, it's a bit scary. I personally wouldn't want to be one guy driving my normal car and having this RC car around me. Well, those remote cars or RC cars, there certainly aren't supposed to be on those real roads. There's, first of all, no purpose whatsoever. It is dangerous in the sense of that someone might scare and turn his car into going into a tree, possibly injuring himself and his passengers. Um, or he just runs over the little RC car and is broken, but probably it didn't do much to the car. So that's easy here. Possibly you just get injured. But it's all, yeah, we would not like to have these kind of things in our road universe. Now, it's a bit the same in the airspace universe. There is a lot of history behind it, development. The people using it with planes, they established proper rules and everything. So it's not going to help if there is suddenly this flying thing around them. They are hard to see. One isn't sure what it's actually going to do. The behavior might be different. You don't know where that pilot is. Is he at all capable to fly the thing? So this can make the situation very difficult for real plane pilots. And if you have an accident in the air, it's usually not just the tree that it was in the way. It was, yeah, you crash down from far, and oftentimes those accidents are fatal. This is why there are these discussions on how to regulate drone usage. And in some countries, they even make you, yeah, they will make you understand and respect the airspace rules and how to behave in it. And this is where I hand over to Matt, who will give us an introduction to such a certification like Part 107 in the US.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Appreciate the introduction. Like she was saying, I'm Matt Delano. I'm the Field Operations Manager here in our US office for senseFly Inc. And following up with the introduction, we're going to kick things off with the 14 CFR, that's Code of Federal Regulations, Part 107, which came down the pipe in August of last year and has been the driving regulatory framework for SUAS operations in the national airspace here in the US. There we go. Okay. So, going over the process, what do we need to do from start to finish, basically, to become a certified UAS operator and do so legally and safely? First of all is going to be studying. The vast majority of people, I think, based off of statistics that are operating UAS for commercial purposes in the United States currently are not experienced aviators. You're looking mostly for, commercial applications for companies such as mining, agriculture, things of that nature that are integrating these systems into their existing workflows to collect data. So some of them, the larger energy companies, have aviation wings currently within their companies, and a lot of them are turning internally to those aviation wings units, whatever you want to call them, to figure out a way to adopt drone technologies so that they can cut costs, cut time, basically the reason we're here and the reason that UAS are exploding. So we want to study. You're going to need to schedule an appointment with the Knowledge Testing Center, and we'll go over some links here in a little bit. There's a PDF for the Knowledge Testing Centers available at faa.gov, which I would recommend as your primary knowledge resource for anything having to do with SUAS and regulatory affairs. Or you can go through the CATS website. You'll then need to pass the initial aeronautical knowledge test, and once you've done that, there are certain steps in the process that are fairly seamless and painless to follow on with setting up an IACRA account if you don't already have one, and completing FAA Form 8710-13 for a remote pilot certificate. Primarily, the route that you're going to want to take is electronically through IACRA. That's the easiest, but there's also an option to go the paper route for those who wish to do so. Here are some of the links for the study materials. You've got your FAA recommended study materials, and then I listed a couple of examples of other resources that have pretty decent knowledge-based selections and documents to go off of. Okay, so registering for the exam, just a quick visual of what was just covered. You've got your two methods for obtaining a remote pilot certificate with SUS rating, and you basically have two main groups for commercially operating. You've got your current pilots with their Part 61 with current flight review, and then you've got your new pilots. Current pilots actually have a little bit different route to take that's a little bit easier than it is for new pilots, but essentially they're the same steps, and essentially it's pretty close to the same test. They are just, it's a little bit streamlined for current aviators who have a Part 61 and current flight review just because of their background and experience, and it's pretty much expected that they're already going to have an in-depth knowledge of reading aeronautical charts and things of that nature, and airspace knowledge, you know, things of that. So there are two options, as you can see, are going to be going to the FAAsafety.org website and taking ALC 451 course. And that's basically it serves two functions. It's the certification process technically for current pilots, and it's also available as a practice exam for new pilots. And it's a wonderful resource. It's a great tool, and you can actually print out and, you know, show proof that you're doing your due diligence, you're practicing properly and everything, and you're taking the study and knowledge seriously. They can also do the registering for the exam through the CATS website, but it's when you go that route, it's going to be a $150 fee. So I can't imagine too many current pilots would opt for that unless for some reason circumstances dictated. For new pilots, recommended, like I said, as the ALC 451 course as, you know, kind of a base study guide. And then they'll have to register for the exam through the CATS website, but you can see that all paths diverge or converge on IACRA, and we'll get to that here pretty quickly. Okay, so the CATS testing facility. First stop would be their website, catstest.com, drone knowledge test. This is kind of an overview of what it looks like. Here in the background is the home page. You'll notice located testing center, and you'll notice that this is a specific section dedicated to UAS and drones. So you'll click on located testing center, and then you'll get a pop-up, and you have two options here. You can either type in your address, distance, and select Airmen knowledge test and located test center that way, or you can select by state. Okay, so for the FAAsafety.gov portion, for the ALC 451, Part 107 Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems test. This, once again, is a good practice test for beginners, and it's the actual certification, first step in the certification process for Part 61 holders. So this in the background is the home site, and the first thing you're going to want to do is create an account, obviously. Once you've done that, once you're registered and in the system, you can click over here on Part 107 Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems, and that will direct you to the course overview. Once you get to the course overview, it's just a matter of enrolling in the course. This gives a brief description, and then once you click enroll in the course, that's when it details the outline. You could review the material ahead of time. It gives you some of the same knowledge links and PDFs and everything that are available on the regular FAA.gov website for UAS. And it just kind of builds and expounds upon that, and then you can kick off the test. And once complete, you'll have actually, through the FAA safety, through the FAST team, you'll have credit, and it'll be registered and logged as an educational credit through the FAA. So it's beneficial all the way around, even if you don't have your Part 61, you're a new pilot, and you're just doing it for practice. All right, IACRA, the Integrated Airman Certification and Rating Application. Got the link here at the top. So once you've taken and passed your 107 exam, you should receive a set of instructions from the testing facility detailing the required steps necessary to complete the process. So what's going to happen is you'll get basically a piece of paper detailing your score and your test number and everything else as you leave, and they should hand you a form or an email, send an email that kind of outlines the instructions for follow-on. It's going to take 24 to 48 hours for your test results to actually register in their system, so just be aware of that. That should be included in their set of instructions. They should be diligent and fill you in on the entire process in detail. That's when you will need to create an account in the IACRA system and submit your application to receive your certification like we covered in the previous slide. So once you go to that homepage, you're going to start the application. There's a quick link in the applicant's options window. It's on the left side of the page, and you'll just click Start New Application. So once you've done that, when you're prompted, you're going to enter your test ID, and the system will automatically retrieve your information. And that's if you try to do it too soon, or the system's lagging and you're within that 24 to 48 hour time period, you may notice that your test doesn't pop up, and it'll give you a warning. It's not saying that that your test has been booted from the system. It's basically saying that it hasn't been fully processed and they can't retrieve that information yet. So once you've completed that application and it's been processed, you're going to receive your temporary certificate in PDF form on the IACRA site. You'll get an email after your TSA background check is complete, which is required for all of these applications. You'll get an email saying that your temporary certificate is ready to go, and at that point you can just log in, and I'll show you a screenshot here in a second of what it's going to look like, and it's available to download as PDF. You can print that out, and it serves as your certificate, and it's perfectly legal until you actually receive your permanent one in the mail. If there are any issues, the website details troubleshooting instructions and provides contact info for who to reach out to. So there's no worries if you have any problems, and you can always reach out to the testing facility as well, and they can direct you to the right personnel as well, or help you with your problem. Okay, so here's the home site. This is what I was talking about before. Once you've logged in, you've got your user information, and then you're going to click Start New Application, and then this is what will pop up. So from here, for application type, you're going to basically choose pilot. There are several options. The other ones escape my mind at this point, but you will want to select pilot. And then from there, the steps fill in as you go and as you complete the information. So once you're done, once everything's processed and in the system, this is what you're going to see for your console at this point. You're going to see your certificate type. It's going to give you your start date, your status date when it actually kicks off, and your type again when it was issued. And then, so status is where if you try to log in too soon initially to process, it will say cannot find test results or something of that nature. Don't worry, if it's within the 24 to 48 hour time period, the system's just lagging a little bit. Your status will eventually, when you log in, pop up. For available actions, this is where you're going to go to download your temporary certificate, and there are also other options that are available, and it doesn't go away. So continually, while you are certified, this will be your status, and this will be your go-to for if you need to print anything out or look for new information. All right, and this is what the certificate looks like. Just throwing a quick image in there. It's a pretty legitimate looking card. There's no photograph on there, so it's not I guess a complete ID. But now that you've registered and you have your remote pilot certificate, this is what it's going to look like. It's very important to keep this on you at all times, as common sense dictates, as well as proof of registration documentation for the aircraft anytime you're operating your system. It needs to be, per the FAA, it needs to be readily accessible, easily accessible by the remote pilot during all SUAS operations. And it's valid for 2 years from basically the date that it showed you were officially registered. And after those 2 years are up, or actually probably a little bit before, just so that you don't lapse in your certification, you need to pass a recurrent knowledge test. And just to cover NOTAMs really quickly, a little bit of a jump in subject there. Filing a NOTAM for commercial operations under Part 107 is not required. That's a pretty key concept. If you've applied for waivers for specific parts of 107 and they've been granted through the FAA, it'll state specifically in the terms of your waiver whether or not you are actually required to file NOTAMs. So that at that point, that's when you need to really pay attention to filing. However, it is beneficial and good safety practice to monitor NOTAMs and TFRs, temporary flight restrictions, in the areas that you're going to be operating. So a couple of different ways you can do this. You can contact airports in the vicinity directly and request the information. And if you're operating in the vicinity of certain airports, it's a good idea probably to establish some sort of rapport with either the manager of the airport, if it's an uncontrolled tower, and any regular operators out of there, or with the tower itself. You can check online by going to tfr.faa.gov, and there's a list of TFRs, and there's a similar website, notams.aim.faa.gov, and you can do that as well. And I'll open up my browser really quickly, and we'll show you a couple of examples of these. Okay, so here's the TFR list. You can get your TFR help, you can check out your special use airspace, you can do airport maps, you can do a TFR map, or you can go by list. All right, and for the NOTAMs, this is kind of your base of operation here. You got your pilotweb.nas.faa.gov. Anything you really need to do here for NOTAMs, you can do. You can go to the search here, and from there you can basically, as long as you have internet connectivity, you can go by location, or you can type in location, and it will list all of the NOTAMs and everything that are in your immediate area in the airspace that you're going to be operating in. All right, a couple of slides of a few resources here, and I'll kind of pause on this so that when anybody's referencing the recording later on, they can check them out. Google's a great tool, obviously, to just type something in as a general search, and a lot of these will pop up, especially the FAA sites. And for study material resources, the FAA is an excellent place to start, and it's even an excellent place to finish, depending on how much time you have to dedicate to and how you feel the resources meet your needs. There are a couple that I mentioned earlier, Skyward and J. Rupert Law, that have great study test guides for free and great resources. Both of them, a lot points back to the FAA.gov site. FAA has done a good job of setting that up. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass back off to Andrea.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt, for this introduction. I know this was very US-based, but of course, not everyone is in the US. I have to tell you that there are some other countries where it's almost working the same way. For example, in France, you have to do basically a ULM certification. You do the exam, they make you learn everything about meteorology, navigation, sectional charts. They really want you to understand how complex the airspace is in order to make sure that you know how to behave in it. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through country by country, but we just picked this example as one of the most popular. Now, though, we're going to look at some things about the airspace and communication that are good to know, even if you don't have to do a certification in your country, because you also want to avoid that they start to do these kind of things where you are. And if you from beginning already show them that you understand and respect, you're going to be just fine, and probably regulations and how things are handled going to be much less complicated. So the airspace is actually classified. It doesn't, when we're out there, we look at the airspace as, yeah, it's wide, open, blue, most of the time sunny when we're out. So it looks pretty free and looks like we can just use all of it. But actually, it's already pretty, everything is mapped out, and it's classified into different classes. We have a class A, B, C, D, E, and G. Class A, you can also do a mental link to altitude. Means that's a airspace very high up at 18,000 feet above mean sea level. That's about 5,500 meters. So we usually don't go there anyhow. Then class B, C, and D, they are airspaces most often linked to major airports. You can see here the little mark at the bottom. These are airport symbols in this case. And you see here class B has a big upside down wedding cake, so different shelves. That airspace actually expands where the top and is very controlled. So B goes for big, or Boeing as well. So you have all the passenger planes here that are landing on the big airports. Class C is a bit the same thing. You see, C can be around, you can do the mental link of crowded. Or Class D airspace, which is dialogue, means that that airport has a control tower that one has to communicate to. So B, C, and D are mainly associated to airports. We're not going to fly near airports, so usually we don't have to deal with them anyhow. We just have to keep the distance from those unless we get authorization or special treatment for doing some project, which is totally possible to organize, but one really has to do all the communication behind it. Then E is also a controlled airspace, and you see it's all the blue around here. Class E is elsewhere, and it's still a controlled airspace. Everyone needs to have a radio in that one, and communication needs to happen. Often this is also too high up for us. We are mainly in Class G airspace, which, they are associating it with go for it, because it's an uncontrolled airspace. In this uncontrolled airspace, you can basically fly wherever you want. No radio or communication needed, often from surface level to 700 feet, or that makes it around 210 meters, etc. What is important to understand is that in Class G airspace, you have all these other participants. There can be planes, especially smaller planes, ULMs, balloon, paragliders, parachutes, other drones, and we can have clouds or fog still. Usually every participant tries to avoid the clouds, but it can happen that he enters into a cloud and just comes out anywhere from that cloud. So it is important that you sort of keep away from the clouds as well, not only from objects, but flying close to clouds can also be dangerous. Since there is no communication or control, you risk that someone might come out of that cloud. Now, how do you know if you are in which type of airspace you are planning your project in? You have a couple of ways to look that up. Either you get yourself a sectional charts. There are also websites where you can look up where there are maps, and you can look up what kind of airspace you're in. Sectional charts are not so easy to read. You really need the legend and then figure out what all the lines mean. Here, for example, the purple full line here, it's a Class B airspace. And you also see the little airport sign here, so you definitely have to stay away from here. But they're also indicating if there are any activities like paragliding, gliders, RC modeling, etc. You will find all that on the map as well. So it can be very useful, but it takes a bit of time until you get used to reading it. What can be very interesting is also this page here. Well, it's actually Google Earth. And from this page, 3dairspace.org, you can download KML files that are showing you the airspaces in Google Earth. So here we have an example, making this a bit smaller here. And you actually see your airspace in 3D like we just saw before on the PowerPoint. Clicking on one of those airspaces gives you the information, mainly the altitudes. So FL means flight levels, and the flight levels always refer to the mean sea level. You have to add 2 zeros, and it's going to be in feet. So this airspace here is from 15,000 to 19,500 feet. And then it's pretty cool here. You can even dive in, and you see that this airspace doesn't touch the surface. So you're probably, if there's nothing else restricting here, you probably just find flying below it. There are, though, airspaces that go right down to the surface. Let me see. This one, for example, SFC surface, it's probably a military zone. You see there are also some red ones hiding here. Might also be a special zone. Here they're just calling it X. So careful on that one. These are so-called special zones, or where there are either you find them on a map as a P, R, D, or TRA, where we have prohibited, restricted, dangerous, or temporary restricted area. Here an example of a map where you can find special use airspaces that are just temporarily activated, and you would see in red the activated airspace, and or then in different colors the airspace that will become activated in a couple of hours. Sky Vector is also showing you the zones where you're not supposed to go fly. Here, big in red, space launch location Cape Canaveral, so maybe not a good idea to go there. Then another thing to take care of is the minimum flight altitudes. So airplanes usually are restricted to stay at a certain altitude or don't go lower, especially over populated areas where it depends on how big or how much population you have, how big the city is, and one also has to stay at higher levels around sensitive objects like military or nuclear stations. Other from that, it can totally be that smaller aircrafts come down to levels of 50 meters, 160 feet, which is at EB and Albury's flight levels. And they mainly do that for exercises, some sort of exercises. And for these to know whether you're in such a situation or not, it's useful to check the NOTAMs, like Matt described just before. NOTAMs is just translated to Notice to Airmen, so that you know if something's going on. They're really short-term activities, and there will also be just noted on the day that you will be flying. Normal minimum flight altitudes are often between 150 to 300 meters, except for paragliders, parachuters, that really they go down to the surface, so they might totally come into your ways. Now, in order to make things a bit simpler for you, we senseFly started to work with AirMap. AirMap is a airspace map provider, basically. So they're offering the service of integrating airspace maps into other software, etc. We have 2 layers, one that is showing near airports, heliports, controlled airspaces, special use airspace, or temporary flight restrictions. Then there is a second layer showing schools, hospitals, wildlife, park, power plants, or prisons. I quickly show you that in emotion. It depends where you place your working area. So let me I go in a place where I have a bit more than just one. There we go. So I place my working area here. And now I would just go here on the layers button, and I click on AirMap layer. it will tell you who and what air map is. Second one as well. And you see it will give me all airspaces that are within a radius of 5 kilometers or 3 miles from my area. So we see here we have a small airport. Here we have the Geneva airport, controlled airspace. So in this zone, you definitely have to communicate with Geneva airport if you want to do any flights. Now here in this airspace, of course, you should communicate as well with this little airport. They're giving you here the phone number. So it's a matter of calling them and discussing when it would be a good time to fly, or sort of taking care a bit that this zone is reserved for your drone flights. Here another one, it's a heliport in Devon. So this can be pretty useful if the layer is not downloaded with the maps, but it's kept in cache. So you might still have it once you're outside in the field. Okay, so communication. What else you can do? All airplanes are sort of communicating with each other. So what you could do is bring a radio or a radio scanner with you and listen to the frequencies in your areas. You find those frequencies either on sectional charts, or if you are closer to an airport, not too close, of course, you will find the airport frequency, and you would hear when planes are starting and landing. So you're a bit more, you know what's going on. Another way would be to have internet connection when you're in field and you're sharing your working area radius with AirNav Pro. It's an application that many pilots have on their phones, and then they would see where there is a drone activity on their map. This option you can activate by going into emotion freeze options. Here, airspace and traffic, and there you will find advisories, send working area advisory to AirNav Pro. You have to create a user account, that's for free, and then you just add your user account credentials here. And with this, you're set. The only thing is that you need internet where you're out in the field. Then, of course, by Airmen rules, there are all these human factors that one has to take care of. So no alcohol within 28 hours before flight, no drugs, no flights after or before 30 minutes of twilight. Otherwise, and you also need anti-collision lights during that time. So better to avoid. Be responsible, check your equipment before the flight, so make sure that your EB really is in good shape and won't be doing crazy things. And make sure you're informed, getting NOTAMs and TFRs in order to know what's happening in the airspace where you're going to operate. Another way that emotion can help you to sort of stay within regulations or legal settings is the working area radius and ceiling. Many countries have limitations on how far and how high you can go, or you might have even gotten special authorization to go to a certain distance or a certain altitude. Then you can just set your working area parameters to that radius and to that altitude. And with this, you're making sure that your flight is staying within those legal boundaries. Then, of course, we also have safety actions. We all know that we can turn off here we can lose the communication link at times, and we could technically turn off that safety action in order to make our drone fly the mission automatically. Be careful with this one. It's not necessarily legal to do so, because you need to be in charge of the drone. You need to know where it is. Then we have the control buttons as well, which just means that you should stay close to your ground station in order to either press the hold button if you're not sure what's happening in your airspace and you just want your drone holding the position where it is, or you call it back home, or you tell it to land immediately by clicking 3 times on Land Now button. Just be careful, this is going to be a circular landing, not the linear landing as you planned. The circular landing will also happen where that drone is at the moment. It will not come back home. It will just land wherever it is. Welcome to the Airspace universe. Have a nice evening. Thank you everyone for joining. See you next time.